And now for our fourth and final lecture that we can all benefit from, Asking for Advice, Pitfalls and Effective Strategies, where we will explore the science of decision-making and how to enhance the way we seek advice. We know that we make better decisions when we seek advice, but are we asking the right questions? This session explores how to ask better questions for smarter decisions. Please welcome Professor Rick Larrick, the Haynes Corporation Foundation Professor of Management and Organizations at Duke's Fuqua School of Business, whose research focuses on decision-making, including environmental decisions, negotiations, and the wisdom of crowds. He explores how we can make better decisions both individually and as groups, and he's particularly interested in how people make decisions that benefit society. Rick is widely published in top journals and teaches core courses on leadership and management at Fuqua. Please welcome Professor Rick Larrick.
It's great to be with you all. As I think about decision-making today, I think about AI potentially answering a lot of our decisions for us, but I still suspect we have lots of decisions we need to make on our own, unguided, and we can think about the basic question of how good are we at intuitive decision-making. So, we have to estimate the value of something or the likelihood of something. At work, we might decide, does someone deserve a promotion? Over the weekend, we decide what movie we want to watch. We're still making intuitive judgments, and there's a whole field of psychology that for decades has examined how good are we at these intuitive decisions, and it frankly has reached kind of a pessimistic conclusion at times, which is that we have biases. So this received a lot of attention in recent years, particularly because Daniel Kahneman, who won a Nobel Prize in economics as a psychologist, published a best-selling book in 2011 called Thinking Fast and Slow. And the heart of this book is a variety of ways in which we get tripped up. And the kind of careful word I've chosen on this slide is these are individual decision-making biases. So it's fair to ask, what's the best way to overcome an individual bias? And one of my answers is don't make an individual decision. Go get a larger sample. Go get another opinion and talk to somebody else. And frankly, this is kind of a blind spot in this literature on the psychology of decision-making, which is we are smarter by expanding what's inside our head by learning from other people. This has gotten attention as well because a long time ago, Francis Galton did a little kind of survey at a county fair in England, having people guess the weight of an ox. He plotted all the data and realized even though individuals could often be wildly high or low, if you just average everybody together, they were pretty smart. And this has been dubbed the wisdom of crowds. Why does it happen? It's because different people know different things, so they use a different approach as they kind of estimate the size of the ox. Whatever they're doing something a little bit different from each other. And this is as we kind of think about pooling different perspectives and different information, this is essentially the basic logic of algorithms today. This idea then of the wisdom of crowds was popularized by James Surowiecki in a book about 20 years ago, and it has just exploded in terms of all the different disciplines that are interested in studying it. So it's got a little bit of economics, a little bit of psychology, but now a lot of computer science. There's a lot of people interested in this idea of let's just pool information and we'll get smarter as a result of it. But there's a lot of specific words up here, which is how do you do it? And one of the key words up here is the independence of people's thinking, that we need to have people thinking differently. The kind of shorthand I'll use for today is we often want fresh eyes on a problem. We want someone who's approaching it differently. So the other thing mathematically is that when we hear the word crowd, we think, oh, I need 100 people. I can't do that. Turns out the most valuable one you can ever get is the second one. So assuming you have an opinion, go talk to somebody else, and that is the biggest bang for your buck in terms of getting a sample size benefit. So go talk to one other person, and in reality, it actually kind of starts to asymptote, to flatten out at about 5 people. So you don't need a whole crowd, you just need to get a few other opinions. Okay, so going to talk to somebody else is a good idea, but as I said, the key thing is that second opinion is more valuable to you if it's different from your own, if you've kind of allowed a new perspective, a set of fresh eyes to be brought to the table. So as we kind of think about the dangers then, it's that can we do things to mess up that independence? And in court, we kind of talk about ways of asking bad questions where you lead the witness. Now, that's often a kind of deliberate way to try to get them to go to a bad place, but we more innocently could end up asking bad questions as well if we're not kind of thinking carefully about how should I formulate the question to really empower the person to reflect on their own knowledge and their own judgment and give it back to us. So we want to avoid these kinds of more innocent ways of asking a bad question. And in that book, Thinking Fast and Slow, Kahneman reviews a lot of research. One of the core ideas in this research in psychology is the idea of anchoring. So let me illustrate what an anchor is. Okay, so this is a kind of classic demonstration of this. You ask people, how long is the Mississippi River? And if you phrase it as, is it longer than 70 miles, yes or no? Most people will say yes, by the way. But then when they guess about 300 miles. If you give a different group of subjects the same question, but you ask, is it longer than 2,000 miles? Many people will say no, but now when they guess, they're going to say 1,500. And the basic principle here is that it really matters kind of what is the first number in your head, because you end up close to it. You get trapped by all the things that kind of go along with how reasonable is that, and you get trapped in that way of thinking. So now we can kind of use this insight and realize, well, this would be a mistake then, arguably, to do this as we ask for advice from others. We want other people to think differently from us and to hear what they really think and how they would generate an answer to a question. So in a series of studies, which I'll show you shortly, we essentially looked at how do people ask for advice. So there can be a neutral way, such as, I'm a grad student, what's a good number of credit cards to own? Open-ended, neutral, versus I'm a grad student, is 2 credit cards a good number? Boy, as soon as that 2 is in there, it's likely that other people are going to be starting to work with the premise of 2, and they're not going to entertain the full space of, well, what would a good answer be? So in research with PhD student Jess Reif and my colleague Jack Saul, we ran a series of 5 studies with about 7,000 people to just look at, do people essentially make the mistake of putting an anchor in their question? What is the harm of it? And so on. So I'll try to show you this to give you a feel for the kind of research we're doing here at Duke, but also to hopefully give you a takeaway that you can actually use in your own ability to ask a question. All right, so one of our first studies was to look at the financial subreddit thread, Reddit subthread, there we go. Reddit is not a sub. Okay, a subthread where we just look to see how often do people insert numbers into their questions. And it turns out it's actually at a pretty high rate that they insert that number. In fact, it's about 30% of the time. And what we find across a bunch of studies is that people put a number in there like that between 30 and 50% of the time. And just think about it, if you put in a kind of a bad number, which you might just by chance, you get this Mississippi effect where it's like a bad number pulls people toward it, and now the advice is less useful to you. So better to leave out the anchor if you can. That's going to be the basic argument. So let me just show you kind of the magnitude of the harm. We had subjects try to estimate the height of this building. Some of you may recognize it from Boston. It's the Prudential Tower. The answer turns out to be 900 feet, 907. But so they could ask other people for advice. We told them we're just going to pool all of it. You're going to be paid for the accuracy of those 6 people's judgments with your own folded in. And they could formulate their question for how they would ask others, how tall is this building? Now, in some sense, the simplest question is, how tall is this building? But about 40% of people say, I think this building is 600 feet. What do you think it is? And then once they put that 600 in there, they tend to get a bunch of answers close to it, and they end up then hurting the overall accuracy of the crowd. So we can now compare how much error is there in the estimate once the whole crowd has given an opinion and we've combined it. And just like with this example, someone who inserts their own opinion of 600 will get a bunch of guesses in that 700, 800 range. That whole crowd is now kind of contaminated, and its error is bigger. So anchors, on average, do tend to lead to a bigger error than if you just manage to ask a neutral question, no anchor. So better not to lead the witness, better not to accidentally bias people along the way. Essentially, those people who inserted the anchor pulled the people away from the truth on average. All right, so why do people include anchors? I won't show you all the details of these studies, but we were curious what motivates it. And it turns out the people who who really want to look competent are more likely to put in anchors. And that's because you kind of want to show that you're smart, you want to show that you've put in some thought, you're not lazy. All of these things motivate putting in numbers, but at the very act of then trying to look smart, you hurt the ability to learn something from the other person because you've trapped their thinking. And we also double-checked, actually, people do judge the complexity of your question, the depth of it, as a way of judging how competent you are. So people are not wrong to think that if they put numbers into their question, they actually do look smarter. So this is kind of a warning sign that we have to somehow balance a set of considerations here, that we'd want to both look competent, but also try to get independent advice. And the question is, can we do both? So this is kind of the final part of our study. The answer is, yes, you can have both. And we essentially propose that you want to give a preparation signal. You want to tell people, hey, I've thought about this, I've calculated my own answer, but I'd really love to get your independent thought on this. What do you think it is? And that is enough to look competent as if you inserted your own number. So it's just a matter of letting people know you're not being lazy and that you have actually put some thought into it. And you really will have a bigger pool of information if people have approached it with fresh eyes, you have your opinion, you can now kind of have a more complete picture of a possible truth. All right, and then I'm going to finish on how can we use these ideas of both having a crowd and also trying to ask a neutral question, which is to think about different places to apply this. So a few examples of avoiding this idea of an anchor. You know, in a meeting, avoid blurting out an opinion too early, especially if you're the boss. People are going to, respond too strongly to it. Ask people to think about ideas before a discussion, both in meetings or just in a kind of one-on-one consultation. I do think there's interesting directions to go with AI. So I think AI will eventually be robust to this, but I would be worried about if you put your own conclusion in with AI, will it kind of go down a path based on your conclusion? Or alternatively, the more that AI becomes more like a companion, I think an interesting social question is, will AI disagree with you? So can we get kind of a friendly debate with AI, or is it going to be geared toward supporting you? Alternatively, don't ask one question of AI, ask it 5 different ways. So kind of spread out the way that AI is reacting to your question. And then I'll finish with this, a last point. There's lots of places where I've managed to use this as I've participated in various kinds of games and raffles. My family more than once has managed to win some kind of guessing game by having everybody make their own independent judgments and average them together. And I'll finish on this point. My students have come to know that every time we're trying to think about something or solve something, Rick is going to say, don't say what you think yet. Let's make sure everybody has thought by themselves first. So I'll leave you with that thought. Thank you.